I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, like I had every single day for decades. Funny thing was, my alarm clock hadn't rung in almost 3 years, but I didn't need it anymore. My body still remembered the old rhythm, the old duty. It was as if some part of me still believed I had to leave the house at 6:15 sharp, ready to start the Saratoga to Boston run, picking up the first passengers of the day. Habits cling to a man, and at 75, habits are carved into you as deep as the lines on your face. The very first thing my eyes landed on was the empty side of the bed. That space has been empty for 3 long years, but every morning my heart forgets for a brief second. Every morning I half expect to roll over and see Edith there, maybe reading her book with the lamp on, or sleeping soundly, her gray hair fanned out across the pillow like soft silver threads. People often say that time dulls grief, that it gets easier. I don't know if that's true. For me, it just gets quieter. I whispered into the stillness, "Good morning, old boy." The words aimed at no one but myself, a little ritual I've clung to since she passed. Then, with slow, aching movements, I rose from bed. My cottage sat on the very edge of Saratoga, small and plain, but it had been home for decades. That morning it was wrapped in silence, the kind of silence you only hear before dawn. I shuffled to the kitchen, turned the kettle on, and my eyes caught the calendar hanging crookedly on the wall. Sunday. That meant the usual visit to Selma and Randall's place. Once upon a time, those Sundays were something I looked forward to, a chance to laugh, eat, and feel like family. But now it was different. Through the window, I saw dawn painting the sky with the first pale streaks of light. The garden, out back, was slowly revealed in those colors. It was small, neat, and alive with flowers. Edith's flowers. She had adored her roses and hydrangeas, fussed over them like they were children. After she died, I kept tending the beds, almost desperately, as if some part of me believed she might walk out one day and scold me if a single rose drooped. Looking at them now pulled me back to our last real talk about Selma. "Hugh, you've got to be firmer with them," Edith had said, her voice weak from illness, but still sharp with wisdom. "Especially with Randall. He's polite enough, but mark my words, he'll walk all over you if you let him." I'd waved her off back then, unwilling to think badly of my son-in-law. What was wrong with giving them a hand now and then? A ride for Selma when their car was in the shop, checking on the house while they vacationed at Lake George, fixing a leaky faucet or tightening a door hinge. Small things, simple things, things any father would gladly do. I thought nothing of it. The kettle's whistle snapped me out of the past. I poured the boiling water, steeped the tea strong, just the way Edith liked it, and sat at the worn kitchen table. My eyes wandered to the photograph hanging on the wall, our golden wedding anniversary. 50 years together, and she had smiled. Through it, even though the sickness was already there, lurking. Her smile was bright, but her eyes, they were tired. I lifted my cup toward her picture like a toast. "You were right, old girl," I whispered. As always, life had shifted after her passing. At first, little things. Randall called more, often, not to check on me, but with errands. Their mower had broken. Could I come over and mow the lawn? Their bathroom tiles needed pulling up. Could I lend a hand? I said yes, happy at first just to feel useful. But those favors, once rare, became steady, expected. Before I realized it, what was occasional had turned into routine. I remembered clearly one time when Edith was still with me. Randall had suggested, half joking, that I fix their fence while also helping with their new air conditioner. Edith cut him short with that voice of hers. Steel velvet, I always called it. "Randall," she told him firmly, "my husband is helping you with the air conditioner because he knows how. But he isn't your handyman. If you need a fence fixed, hire someone or do it yourself." Randall laughed, Said he was joking, but I caught a flicker in his eyes, something sharp, something resentful. I hadn't understood it then, but I see it now. I drained my tea and checked the clock. 7 already. Still hours before I had to be at Selma's. Maybe, I thought, I could finally enjoy that book gathering dust on my bedside table, the biography of Lewis and Clark. I had barely managed 3 chapters. Every time I sat down to read, some new favor called me away. I carried it to my chair by the window where the light was best. My eyes aren't what they once were, but I still refuse to wear the glasses Selma gave me last Christmas. They pinch my nose and warp the edges of my vision, an insult to a man who spent 50 years watching every detail on the road. I had read only a few pages when the phone rang. Selma's voice rushed through the line. "Daddy, can you come earlier?" "Today?" "Randall wants to show you something in the garage before the rain starts." I looked out the window. Clear skies, not a single cloud. "Selma," I said, "the forecast says it'll be sunny all day." "Oh, you know those weather reports," she replied quickly, her voice tightening. "Anyway, Randall really needs your help. It won't take long." I sighed, closed the book, and set it aside. "All right, I'll be there in an hour." "Thanks, Dad. You're the best." Funny thing was, Selma rarely said those words, unless she wanted something. I took my time dressing, already picturing the so-called garage problem. Likely his old Ford again. The thing had been sputtering for months, but instead of paying a mechanic, Randall always turned to me. He was well off, an accountant with a solid job at a construction company. But spending on repairs seemed to pain him more than pawning it off on his father-in-law. Before I left, I glanced at Edith's photo on the dresser. "What would you say now, dear?" I muttered. I could almost hear her answer. Be firm. Easy for her to say. My Chevy, 12 years old but still purring like new, started at the first turn of the key. That truck was my pride, the last car Edith and I bought together. On the drive to Selma's, I thought about how things had changed. When Selma was small, her eyes lit up whenever she saw me. I was her hero then, the man who could fix her toys, carry her on his shoulders, and drive her anywhere her little heart desired. I'd been proud to give her away to Randall, believing I was leaving her in good hands. And for a while, it seemed that way. They visited often, came for dinner, sought our advice. But slowly, piece by piece, that closeness faded. Maybe it was money. Randall had always been ambitious and careful to the point of stingy. Or maybe Selma simply grew into his ways. The casual calls became fewer, replaced by requests. Edith had seen it coming and tried to shield me. "Hugh's too kind for his own good," she told Selma once. "You can't ask him to keep straining. His knees after a lifetime of driving. He isn't young anymore." But Selma brushed it off, calling her mother overprotective. Randall, clever as ever, always found a way around Edith, cornering me directly when she wasn't present. I pulled into their driveway, the big 2-story house standing proud with its neat lawn and gleaming garage. Far larger than they needed for a family of 3, but Randall had insisted it was about status. Their son, Nash, was away in California at college, yet the house seemed built more for show than for comfort. Randall was already there, waiting at the open garage door. He had that smile plastered on, the kind that never reached his eyes. "Hugh, glad you made it early." I climbed out of my truck, forcing my aching knees to steady me. "What's the trouble, Randall?" He gestured to the Ford. "Won't start. Thought maybe you could take a look. You've got all that engine experience." I stepped closer, glancing under the hood. The car wasn't terrible, but it needed a real mechanic. "Randall, I drove buses, but I didn't repair them. That's why we had mechanics." "You know more than most people," he insisted. "Just see if it's something simple." I sighed and leaned in. Years on the road had taught me the basics. But I wasn't a magician. As I worked, Randall's voice kept going. By the way, while you're here, could you check the porch roof? Leaks when it rains, and the back door squeaks something awful. Oh, and Selma wants you around next week when they deliver the new refrigerator. We'll both be at work, and you're home anyway. I straightened up, a sharp pain shooting through my back. It wasn't just one favor. It was never one favor. It was a list, always a list. And today, I wasn't here as a guest for dinner. I was here as their handyman. Edith had warned me. She had seen it clearer than I ever had. Don't let them use you, Hugh. You're their father, not their servant. But I'd always excused it, telling myself they were young, busy, carrying burdens I no longer carried. And I let it go. Randall, I began, but Selma's voice cut me off. Daddy, you're here. She kissed my cheek quickly. Did Randall show you the car? We really need it. I've got important clinic appointments next week. Selma, I'm not sure I can fix it. It needs a mechanic. But you've always fixed things, she said, frowning. Remember when you fixed my bike when I was 8? A bike and a car are two different things, dear. Just try, Daddy, please, for us. Randall's going through a rough time at work. We're trying to save money. I looked at her, at the woman who had once been a little girl curled in my lap, begging for road stories. Now her eyes only held impatience. She wanted my yes, nothing else. All right, I said at last. I'll see what I can do. But no promises. Her face brightened instantly. That's good. Now let's go inside. I'm just getting dinner ready. By the way, I was wondering if you could help with the general cleaning next weekend. Randall's busy with his reports, and I can't do it alone. I followed her into the house in silence, thinking that if Edith were alive, she wouldn't have let it get this far. She would have protected me like she always did. Or maybe she would have given me the strength to protect myself. Over lunch, the conversation invariably returned to the fact that they needed my help. Randall talked about his plans to renovate the property, clearly hinting that he was counting on my free labor. Selma was discussing her friend's upcoming visit from New York, for which she needed to get the house in perfect condition. How are you doing, Daddy? Selma finally asked me, as if she had remembered her decorum. Not bad, I answered. I've started reading a book about Lewis and Clark. Oh, that's interesting, she said, clearly not listening. By the way, there's a light bulb burned out in the basement. Would you mind replacing it this afternoon? Randall is afraid of heights. I looked at my son-in-law, a healthy 45-year-old man who was afraid of heights, but not afraid to ask his 75-year-old father-in-law to climb a stepladder. At that moment, I could almost hear Edith's voice. Say no to them, Hugh. For once in your life, say no. But I didn't. I nodded and continued eating, feeling each bite stick in my throat. I didn't say no today, but looking at Randall's smug face and the detached look on my daughter's face, I thought I might have to do it soon for my own sake, for the memory of Edith, who always wanted me to be stronger. After lunch, I changed a light bulb in the basement, looked at the porch roof, oiled the hinges of the back door, and fiddled with the Ford for another 2 hours, but still couldn't get it started. When I finally got ready to leave, it was nearly 7 in the evening. Selma shoved the next week's to-do list into my hands as if I were not her father, but a hired hand. Thanks, Dad. I don't know what we'd do without you, she said. But there was no real gratitude in her voice. On the way home, I thought about how I'd gradually gone from father and father-in-law to free laborer, and that Edith, who'd seen it from the beginning, was right. Always right. The rattling sound of the phone woke me up at 6 on a Tuesday morning. I struggled to reach the receiver, wondering who could be calling so early. Dad, are you asleep? Selma's voice sounded annoyed, as if I'd woken her up, not the other way around. Not anymore, I answered, stifling a yawn. Something wrong? The Ford still wouldn't start. Randall has to be in an important meeting at 9 hours, and my car is in the shop until tonight. Could you come and drive him? I glanced at my watch. Selma's house was about 20 minutes away, which meant I had to leave in half an hour at the most. All right, I'll be there in 45 minutes. Daddy, her voice became shrill. Randall has to Bether by 9 wa. 45 minutes is too long. Selma, I have to at least wash up and get dressed. Okay, but try to hurry. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sighed heavily. I'd gotten home late last night after a day spent trying to fix the Ford. My knees and back were still sore from standing in a reclined position over the engine for hours. After a quick wash and a slice of toast and tea, I got into my pickup. The morning was cool and misty, typical of early fall in Saratoga. I drove through the waking city thinking about how often Selma and Randall had called with similar requests. Lately, it was becoming a system. When he pulled up to their house, Randall was already waiting outside, tapping his foot nervously. He was wearing his best suit, the navy blue one with the tie I'd given him last Christmas. "Finally!" he exclaimed, climbing into the passenger seat. "I thought I was going to be late." "Good morning, Randall," I said, trying to stay calm. Yeah, good morning." He looked at his watch. "We need to get to the business center and fast." I pulled onto the road, mentally noting that I hadn't heard a thank you or even the usual greeting. Randall was busy on his cell phone, occasionally taking his eyes off the road to tell me where to turn or overtake a slow-moving car. Like I hadn't driven buses on these roads most of my life. Left here, he pointed to the turnoff to a modern office building. "You can drop me off at the entrance." I stopped, and Randall jumped out of the car, dropping me off as he went. "Pick me up at 5. Don't be late." The door slammed shut, and Hedis appeared into the building without looking back. I sat in the car, staring after him, thinking about how it had come to this. When exactly did I go from being a respected father-in-law to a personal chauffeur? On my way home, I stopped at a small cafe to have a proper breakfast, a cup of strong coffee, and an omelet. At a nearby table sat a gay-haired man about my age reading a newspaper. He caught my eye and nodded. "Good morning," he said. "You don't look like you've had the best start to the day." I smiled, surprised by his observation. "That noticeable?" "I've been a railroad conductor for 30 years, he replied. "I learned to read people." Parker Hicks. He held out his hand. Hugh Aldrich. I shook his hand. Retired bus driver. "Ah, a fellow transportation worker." Parker laughed. "You live here in Saratoga?" "Yeah, on Wildwood Drive." "You do?" "I just moved to the same street, 42. So we're neighbors. We got a talking." Parker turned out to be a widower like me, moving to Saratoga to be closer to his daughter. But unlike my situation, his daughter insisted on moving to help him, not the other way around. "Lisa calls every day and asks if I need help," Parker said with warmth in his voice. "Sometimes it's even annoying, but I appreciate her concern." I nodded, feeling a prick of envy. "When was the last time Selma called just to see how I was doing?" "I don't remember." "Do you have kids too?" Parker asked. "A daughter," I answered. "Selma. She lives here with her husband. Do you see them often?" "Too often," I blurted out, and I regretted it. "I mean, yeah, we talk a lot." Parker looked at me carefully. "You know, in 30 years on the railroad, I've learned not only to read people, but also to listen to what they don't say." I hesitated. Complaining about my own daughter to a stranger seemed wrong, but there was something about Parker's open face that made me want to be frank. "Let's just say," I said, at last, "they're counting on my help." "I see." Parker nodded. "And how often do you play the role of chauffeur at 6 mo in the morning?" I raised my eyebrows in surprise, and he grinned. I recognized the look on the face of a man who's been dragged out of bed early. "Plus, your pickup truck is in the parking lot. Engine, still warm. You'd look good as a detective." I smiled involuntarily. "Yeah, I drove my brother-in-law to work. His car broke down and he couldn't call a cab." The question caught me off guard with its simplicity. Really? Why didn't Randall call a cab or ask a coworker for a ride? Probably figured I'd be cheaper, I muttered. Parker shook his head. You know, Hugh, my wife Virginia always said, respect can't be bought, but it's easy to lose. It sounds as if your family has begun to lose respect for you. His words echoed painfully in me, reminding me of Edith's warnings. We exchanged phone numbers before we parted ways, and Parker invited me to stop by his place for a weekend barbecue. Nothing fancy, just steaks and beer. Unless your family has some renovations planned for you, he added with a chuckle. When I got home, I found the red light blinking on my answering machine. A message from Selma. Dad, I forgot to tell you this morning. We're getting the building materials for the porch on Thursday. Randall will be at work and I'm at a conference. Would you mind taking delivery? Oh, and by the way, our lawn is completely overgrown. Why don't you come by today and mow it? I looked at the phone, feeling the irritation building inside. I'd already taken Randall to work today and I had to pick him up at 5. Now I had to mow the lawn and taking deliveries on Thursday like I don't have my own business. I dialed Selma's number, but it went to voicemail. She was at work and probably couldn't answer. Selma, it's Dad. I'll pick Randall up at 5 like we agreed. But I can't. Do your lawn today. I have other plans. I paused, surprised at my own boldness. I'll call you back about Thursday. I hung up, feeling a strange mixture of guilt and relief. It was the first time in a long time I'd turned my daughter down. Edith would be proud. To distract myself, I decided to tackle my garden. Edith's flowers needed tending and the hedges needed trimming. Working outdoors always helped me think. I was just finishing the hedge when I heard a voice. Well done. I see we have a love of order in common. When I turned around, I saw Parker standing by the fence with 2 bottles of beer in his hands. I thought you could use some refreshment after all that work, he said, handing me one of the bottles. We sat on a bench in my garden enjoying the cool beer and the warm fall sun. It's a beautiful garden, Parker remarked. Your work? My wife's. Actually, I replied. Edith loved flowers. I'm just maintaining what she created. How long has she been gone? Years. Cancer. Parker nodded. Virginia's been gone 5 years. Heart. You know what the hardest thing is? Having no one to talk to in the evening just to share thoughts about the day gone by? I nodded understandingly. That's what I miss the most. Our evening conversations with Edith when we discussed everything from politics to neighborhood gossip. And your daughter? Parker asked. Do you have heart-to-heart talks with her? I gave a wry chuckle. Selma is too busy with her life, and what are we supposed to talk about? Lately, our conversations have been reduced to a list of things I have to do for them. How many of those things are there? More and more, I took a sip of beer. You know, things were different when Edith was alive. She was, protected me, if you could call it that. Kept them from demanding too much. And now there's no one to protect you. The question was direct, but not offensive. Parker looked at me with genuine interest. I have to defend myself now, I answered, but frankly not very successful at it. Why? Parker asked. You do not look like a man who lacks character, I wondered. Why really? All my life I was independent, made decisions, was responsible for my passengers, for my family. When did I become so, submissive? Probably because it's my daughter, I finally said. It's hard to say no to your own child, even if that child is taking advantage of you. Parker shook his head. I apologize if that sounds harsh, but from the outside, that's what the situation looks like. My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. Selma, Dad, you left a message saying you couldn't mow the lawn, but it really has to be done today. We have guests coming tomorrow from Randall's company and everything has to look perfect. Selma, I've already told you I have other plans. What plans could be more important than helping your own daughter? Her voice became harsh. Randall is really counting on you. I looked at Parker, who pretended not to listen, but clearly heard everything. I've already taken him to work at 6 this morning, and I'll pick him up at 5. I think that's enough. But the lawn, hire someone. I was surprised at the firmness in my own voice. Or have Randall do it himself this weekend. You're getting selfish, Dad. She sounded accusatory. After all we do for you, what exactly do you do for me, Selma? The question hung in the air. There was silence on the other end of the line. You know what I mean? She murmured at last. We're always here for you if you need anything. But somehow it's always me who needs something from you, not the other way around, I said, amazed at my own courage. I'll pick Randall up at 5 like I promised. Goodbye, Selma. I hung up the phone, feeling my heart pounding. Parker looked at me with respect. Bravo, he said quietly. The first step is always the hardest. I nodded, still stunned by my determination. Edith had always said, Hugh, you're too kind. People take advantage of that. Maybe it was time to stop being so kind. At 5 sharp, I pulled up to Randall's office. He came out 10 minutes later, talking on the phone and gesturing to me that he'd be done soon. Yes, of course, Mr. Jenkins. I'll have everything ready for tomorrow's meeting, he said as he got into the car. No, it's no problem. I'll see you tomorrow. He put the phone away and turned to me. Home and hurry up. I have a lot of work to do tonight. No. Hello? No, thanks for coming. Nothing. Selma called today, I said, pulling into the driveway. She wanted me to mow your lawn. Randall looked annoyed. You know the company's coming over tomorrow. I need to make a good impression. I said no, I said calmly. What? He turned to me clearly shocked. Why? Because I had other plans and I'm not your gardener, Randall. But we're family, he exclaimed. Family helps each other. That's right, I agreed. But it has to be mutual. And lately, I don't see you and Selma helping me. But I do see a long list of things I have to do for you. Randall squirmed uncomfortably in his seat. Well, you're retired. You got plenty of free time. We have jobs, responsibilities. I got a life too, Randall. I don't sit at home waiting for you to call me with another favor. The rest of the drive was spent in tense silence. When we pulled up to their house, Randall jumped out of the car, tossing it over his shoulder. So, you're not going to help us? Fine. We'll see how you do when you need our help. He slammed the door and disappeared into the house. I sat there looking after him, thinking about the last time I had really needed their help and whether I had gotten it. When I got home, I found a small box on my doorstep. A note from Parker. Stopped by, but you weren't here. Leaving homemade apple pie, Virginia's recipe. Drop by tomorrow for tea. I smiled, bringing the pie into the house. It's strange how quickly new friendships appear when you start letting go of old connections. In the evening, sitting in Edith's chair with a slice of pie and a cup of tea, I reflected on our conversation with Parker and what he had said about self-respect. Edith had often said similar things in the last months of her life. Don't let them use you, Hugh, she used to say. You deserve respect, even from your own children, especially from your own children. I glanced at her picture on the mantelpiece. You know, darling, I said quietly, I think I'm finally beginning to understand what you meant. Thursday was unusually chilly for the beginning of fall. The rain had been pounding on the roof of my house since early morning, and I didn't feel like going out, but I decided to keep the promise I had made to Selma about taking delivery of the building materials. After all, I had already agreed to. At 10, I pulled up in front of their house. The street was deserted. The neighbors had long since left for work. I settled on the veranda in an old wicker chair I had once given Selma and Randall and waited for the delivery truck. Sitting there, I thought back to our last conversation with Parker. After that day when I refused to mow the lawn, we started seeing each other more often. Yesterday, over a game of chess, he told me about his daughter, Lisa. She insisted that I move in with them in a large house with a separate annex form, said Parker, moving the queen. But I refused. Do you know why? I shook my head, contemplating my next move. Because independence is the last thing we have left at our age, Hugh. When your body starts to fail and your friends are leaving one by one, being able to decide for yourself. How to get through the day is a treasure you can't give away. His words stuck in my head, reminding me of the way Selma and Randall had gradually stripped me of that very thing. Independence, freedom of choice, the ability to decide how to spend my days. The sound of a truck pulling up brought me back to reality. A large van with a construction store logo pulled up in front of the house. The driver, a young guy with tattoos on his arms, jumped out of the cab. "Delivery for Randall Price?" he asked, checking his clipboard. "Yeah, I'm his father-in-law," I answered, rising from my chair. "I'll take delivery." The driver nodded and opened the back door of the van. Inside was a mountain of materials, boards, sheets of plywood, bags of cement, boxes of fasteners, and tools. "Sign here," he handed me a clipboard. "Where to unload?" I looked at the amount of materials. Randall had talked about asmol repair to the porch, but this would be enough to build a whole new addition. "Let's go under the garage overhang," I suggested. "It's dry there." For the next hour, the driver and his partner, whom I hadn't noticed before, hauled heavy materials. My knees whimpered in protest. My back ached with every movement. But I stubbornly continued to help. Pride did not allow him to show that at 75 I could no longer do such work. When we finished, I struggled to the chair on the veranda and sank heavily into it, feeling my heart pounding from overexertion. The driver, about to leave, gave me a concerned look. "Are you all right, sir? Can I get you some water?" "I'm fine," I said with a wave of my hand. I just needed to catch my breath. When the van pulled away, I pulled out my cell phone and dialed Randall's number. He answered after the 5th ring. "Yeah, Hugh, I'm a little busy. The delivery's here," I said. "It's all stacked up in the garage, but Randall, that's enough material. For a whole house, not a porch." "Oh, yeah." I could hear the impatience in his voice. I thought I'd renovate the side addition and the back patio at the same time. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. Right. "And who's going to do all this?" I asked, already guessing the answer. "Well, I thought you'd help," he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You have a lot of free time on your hands, and I can only do it on the weekends, and not always." I took a deep breath, trying to fight the irritation that was building. "Randall, that's a lot of work. Not for one person, especially not someone my age." "Come on, Hugh." His tone turned, slightly dismissive. "You're in great shape for your age, and who else would I trust with a job like this? It's for the family." I didn't answer, and he went on, taking my silence for agreement. "By the way, my Ford's still standing. The mechanic wants $800 for repairs. It's a ripoff. I thought maybe you'd take another look with your experience. Randall, I told you before I'm not a mechanic. I was a driver." "Yes. Yes, I remember," he interrupted. "But still, $800. That's crazy. Look, I gotta run to my meeting. I'll see you tonight." "Okay. Selma's making your favorite casserole." He disconnected before I could tell him I wasn't coming over tonight. I sat on the veranda of their house, looking out at the rain and feeling the determination growing inside. Something had to change. This can't go on like this. I got home around noon, soaked and tired. After changing into dry clothes, I called Parker and told him what had happened. "Come over to my place," he suggested. "I'll make you a good coffee and we'll discuss your situation." 20 minutes later, I was already sitting in Parker's kitchen, warming my hands on a cup of strong coffee. "So," he said, taking a seat across from me, "they want you to single-handedly build them an addition, fix up their car, and I assume continue to be their personal chauffeur." I nodded, feeling how ridiculous that sounded when said out loud. "And all for free, of course," Parker added, shaking his head. "Hugh, Do you realize they're just using you? I do, I admitted. But this is my daughter, my only child. So, Parker leaned forward. That doesn't give her the right to treat you like free labor. You're her father, not her servant. Parker's words echoed in my head, echoing what Edith had said. You're their father, not their servant. It was as if she was speaking to me through him. What am I to do? I asked quietly. Speak to them plainly, Parker answered without hesitation. Tell them you're willing to help in a reasonable way, but you can't. Be their full-time employee, and if they don't realize that, perhaps you need to distance yourselves for a while. Distance? I raised my eyebrows. Are you suggesting I stop communicating with my own daughter? Sometimes people only appreciate what they have when they lose it. Parker shrugged. Virginia often said, the best lesson is the one taught by life itself. We talked for a few more hours. Parker told how after his wife died, his son tried to control his life by insisting that he sell the house and move into a nursing home for his own good, and how he steadfastly refused, after which his son didn't speak to him for months, and then apologized and acknowledged his right to be independent. Sometimes you have to be willing to lose something to keep yourself, Parker said in parting. Think about it. Back home, I sat in Edith's chair and looked at her picture for a long time. What would you do in my place? I asked quietly. Of course, the picture didn't answer, but I knew the answer. Edith never let anyone overstep the boundaries. Respect, not even our favorite daughter. I picked up the phone and called Selma. Papa. Her voice sounded surprised. Are you coming over for dinner? No, I answered calmly. We need to talk, Selma. A serious talk. Could you and Randall come to my place tomorrow night? Tomorrow? She hesitated. We have plans. Dinner with Randall's co-workers. Saturday then, I suggested. It's important, Selma. Okay, she sighed. Saturday, 6 at night. But what's wrong? We'll talk when we meet. I said goodbye and hung up. The next day was spent in preparation. I didn't just want to say everything that had accumulated. I wanted to be ready for any outcome, including the most radical. I pulled a small suitcase from the mezzanine, the same. One Edith and I had taken on our last trip to the coast of Maine together 6 months before she died. I carefully stowed several sets of clothes, personal hygiene items, medications, a photograph of Edith, and a small box of memorabilia. Parker, whom I told of my plans, offered to let me stay with him if I needed to. My door is always open to you. Oh boy, he said. And you know what? I've been meaning to go fishing in Maine for a long time. Will you keep me company if your family negotiations don't go according to plan? I nodded gratefully, touched by his friendly encouragement. Saturday night at 6 bar sharp, Selma's car pulled up. She and Randall entered the house with strange smiles. Hi, Daddy. Selma pecked me on the cheek. We won't be long. We still have plans for tonight. Don't worry, it won't take long. I pointed to the couch in the living room and sat down in the chair across from them, the same one Edith always occupied during serious family conversations. What's the matter? Randall looked impatient. Was there something you wanted to talk about? I took a deep breath and began. Our relationship has changed a lot in the last 3 years since Edith's passing, and I don't think it's for the better. Selma tensed, and Randall crossed his arms over his chest with the look of a man ready to defend himself. What do you mean? Selma asked cautiously. I mean that I've gone from father and father-in-law to free labor for your family, I said bluntly. Driver, gardener, handyman, watchman, the list goes on, and all this without a single thank you or even an acknowledgement that my time and effort is worth something too. But we're a family, Selma exclaimed. A family helps each other. That's right, I agreed. A family helps each other. But the help must be mutual and voluntary, not one-sided and forced. We really appreciate your help, Daddy, Selma began with the tone she used when she was a child, when she wanted to beg for something. You know how busy we are, Howard, we work. Don't you think I've been working? I interrupted. 50 years driving a bus, providing for your family, raising you after your mother died when you were 12. Edith and I never asked our parents to sacrifice their time and health for us. We managed on our own. Times have changed, Randall interjected. Things are more expensive now. Life is more complicated. That's no excuse for using a loved one, I said firmly. I'm willing to help you when you need it, but I'm not your free labor, Randall. I won't build you an addition, fix your car, or be your personal driver. I deserve respect and the right to decide for myself how to spend my days. There was a heavy silence in the room. Selma looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Randall frowned, tapping his fingers on the armrest of the couch. Is that all you had to say? Selma said at last. Invited us here to accuse us of asking for help. Not asking, but demanding, I corrected. And yes, I wanted to make the boundaries clear. I am ready to help, but within reasonable limits, and when I think I need it, and not at your first call. Leaving my own business. What business could you possibly have? Randall snorted. You're retired. That comment hit me harder than I'd expected. It was as if I was no longer a person entitled to my own time and interests when I retired. I have a lot of things to do, Randall, I replied coldly. I read books, I go out with friends, I tend Edith's garden. I live a full life that doesn't revolve around your needs. Selma jumped up from the sofa, her face flushed with anger. I can't believe it. You've become so selfish, Daddy. We ask for a little help and you act like we're exploiting you, aren't we? I remained calm, which only seemed to annoy her more. When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? Not with a request, not with a demand, but just to talk. Selma opened her mouth, but closed it immediately, unable to find an answer. Exactly. I nodded. We only see each other when you need something from me. This isn't family, Selma. It's use. Randall stood up, taking Selma's hand. I think we should go now. Obviously, you've turned against us. Maybe when you cool down, we can talk normally. I'm perfectly calm, I assured him. And I really need your answer. Are you willing to respect my boundaries and my right to decide when and how I can help you? Selma snatched her hand from Randall's and turned to me. You know what, Daddy? You're putting us in a terrible position. We were counting on your help with the repairs with the car. What are we supposed to do now? The same thing all other people do, I answered. Hire professionals or do it ourselves. That takes money. Randall was indignant, which we don't have right now. Then maybe you should put it off until a better time, I suggested. What would you do if you weren't counting on the free labor of an old man? Randall's face contorted with anger. If you don't want to help your family, maybe we shouldn't be in contact at all, he blurted out. Randall, Selma exclaimed, but there was no real protest in her voice. No, really, Randall continued. If he doesn't want to be a part of the family to help us when we need it, then why have a relationship at all? I looked at my daughter, expecting her to rise to my defense, to say something against those cruel words. But she remained silent, staring at the floor. Do you agree with him, Selma? I asked quietly. She raised her eyes, full of tears, but not from sympathy for me, but from resentment. I don't know what's happened to you, Papa. You've changed. You've become cold, distant. If you don't want to help us, if you think it's such a burden, maybe Randall's right. I stared at her, feeling something finally break inside me. This was my girl. The one I'd raised alone after her mother died. The one I'd read bedtime stories to. The one whose broken knees I'd healed. The one whose tears I'd wiped away. And now she stood in front of me, practically rejecting me because I dared to ask for simple respect. Okay, I said at last. If help is the only thing that binds us together, if you don't need me without it, then the choice is clear. I stood up and walked slowly out of the room. They stared at me in silence, clearly not understanding what I was doing. I came back a minute later with a suitcase in my hand. Daddy. Selma looked confused. "What are you doing?" "Choosing myself," I answered calmly. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not bitterly, not wickedly, but with a new sense of release. I put the suitcase down, went to the picture of Edith on the mantelpiece, took it carefully, and put it in the side pocket of the suitcase. "You can't just go away," Selma looked stunned. "Where are you going to go?" "I have a place." I smiled again, and friends who appreciate me not for what I can do for them, but for who I am. I picked up my suitcase and headed for the door. Selma and Randall stood frozen with shock, clearly not expecting this turn of events. They thought I'd give in, apologize, agree to their terms, as I'd always done. "If you change your mind and decide you need me as a father and not as free labor," I said, turning around in the doorway, "you know where to find me." I stepped out onto the porch, feeling oddly light. The sun was already setting, coloring the sky with pinks and golds. I took a deep breath of the evening air and walked down the path to the gate without looking back. Behind me, I heard Selma run out onto the porch. "Papa!" she shouted. "You can't just leave! We're family!" I turned around, still smiling. Family is built on love and respect, Selma, not on being used. When you're ready for a real family relationship, I'll be glad to see you. With those words, I walked out the wicket and down the street, feeling myself getting a little freer, a little stronger, with each step. For the first time in the 3 years since Edith's death, I felt that I was doing exactly what she would have wanted me to do, protecting myself, my dignity, my right to be respected. I didn't look back, but I knew Selma was still standing on the porch, staring at me with disbelief and shock. She had never seen me act so forcefully. This was a whole new man to her, not the malleable father she could manipulate, but a man with a sense of dignity. When I reached Parker's house, I knocked on the door. He opened it almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting for me. "Did it work?" he asked, looking at my suitcase. They chose Ishrugged, and so did I. Parker nodded understandingly and stepped back, letting me into the house. "Welcome to your new life, you," he said. "How about a fishing trip? Maine is beautiful this time of year." I set my suitcase down, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe fully. "You know," I said, "that sounds wonderful." Sunday morning greeted me with an unfamiliar ceiling and sounds that weren't in my house. The quiet hum of the refrigerator behind the wall and the muffled noise of the neighbor's lawnmower. I lay in Parker's guest bedroom, remembering the events of last night and marveling at my own resolve. I, Hugh Aldridge, 75 years old, a former bus driver, had left home for the first time in my life, slamming the door. Or rather, I slammed it gently behind me, but that didn't change the point. "Good morning, fugitive." Parker stood in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "How did you sleep in your new place?" "Surprisingly well." I sat up in bed, accepting the cup. "Thanks for the shelter." "It's nothing," he said. "That's what friends are for." We ate breakfast on the veranda, looking out at the pinking morning sky. Parker didn't ask about the details of last night's conversation with Selma and Randall, for which I was grateful. Instead, he unfolded a map on the table. "Here's my suggestion," he said, pointing to a curving line heading north. "We go to Maine, to Sabago Lake. An old friend of mine has a small shore house there that he rents out to fishermen. It's off-sea, so the cabin is available. A week of fishing, fresh air, and no strings attached. What do you say?" I stared at the map, feeling a long-forgotten sense of anticipation awaken inside. Edith and I loved to travel when she was alive. I hadn't been out of Saratoga much in the last 3 years, except for trips with Selma and Randall. "That sounds wonderful," I replied. "When do we leave? What's wrong with today?" Parker smiled. "If we leave in a couple hours, we'll be there by tonight." That's what we decided. I called a neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, and asked her to look after my house and Edith's flowers. The old lady promised to water the roses and check the mail. We left at 10 sacks in the morning in my pickup truck. Parker insisted that I drive. "You're a professional driver?" he said. "I've spent my whole life on trains and I don't feel comfortable driving." The drive to Maine took about 6 hours. We drove slowly, stopping at scenic spots and small roadside cafes. Parker was a great traveling companion. He knew many stories about his railroad travels and could listen without interrupting. About halfway to Sabago Lake, I realized that I hadn't checked my phone since this morning. Usually, I kept it handy waiting for Selma to call me with another request. Now, the phone was in the glove compartment, and it didn't bother me at all. "What are you thinking about?" Parker asked, noticing my thoughtfulness. "About freedom," he answered. Strangely, I felt more free now, sitting in a car hundreds of miles from home, than I did when I was in my own living room. Parker nodded understandingly. "Sometimes you have to be physically distant to feel emotionally liberated. You know what my Virginia used to say? Freedom is not the absence of obligations, but the ability to choose for yourself what obligations to make." I nodded, thinking that Edith would probably agree with that. She'd always told me that you had to know how to say no, even to people close to you if their requests were out of line. "I wish I'd listened to her sooner," I muttered. "Who?" Parker asked. "Edith, my wife. She warned me that Selma and Randall would use me if I let them, and she was right. She always is. It's never too late to start listening to wise counsel," Parker observed, even if it was years ago. By evening, we reached Sabago Lake. The cabin of Parker's friend turned out to be a small log structure 100 meters from the shore. Nothing luxurious, but clean and cozy. 2 bedrooms, a living room with a fireplace, a kitchen with basic amenities, and a covered veranda overlooking the lake. Walter's house. Parker introduced as we unloaded our stuff. "Walter Kenny, my college classmate. He spends his summers here and goes to Florida for the winter. Typical snow migrant," he grinned. We settled in, unpacked the groceries we'd bought along the way, and settled on the porch with beers, watching the sun set behind the lake, coloring the water golden and scarlet. "Here's to new beginnings," Parker lifted the bottle. "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking glasses with his. We sat in silence, broken only by the splash of the waves and the distant cry of seagulls. For the first time in a long time, I felt peaceful. Monday morning greeted us with mist over the lake and a chill. After breakfast, Parker retrieved 2 rods and a box of fishing tackle from the pantry. "How long have you been fishing?" he asked, holding out one of the rod's tome. "About 20 years ago, I guess," I admitted. Edith wasn't much of a fisherman, and after she died, I didn't have time for it. "It's okay. It's like riding a bike. It's a skill you don't forget," Parker encouraged me. We walked down to a small dock where a simple wooden boat was tied up. "Walter's gift to all the guests," Parker explained. Ash helped me into the boat. "No motor, but it's good for fishing in a quiet cove." He pushed the oar off the dock, and the boat glided smoothly across the mirror-like surface of the lake. The fog gradually cleared, revealing a magnificent view of the surrounding hills covered with golden red fall forest. We cast our fishing rods and waited. The silence was special, not oppressive like loneliness, but calm and comfortable, as it can be only between old friends who do not need to fill every pause with words. "Look, you've got a bite," Parker suddenly exclaimed. I yanked the rod, feeling resistance at the other end of the line. After a short struggle, I pulled out a decent-sized bass. "Nice catch," Parker approved. "Sounds like you've got talent. We spent the entire morning on the lake catching enough fish for a good dinner." When the sun was high, we returned to shore. There we were met by a man about our age sitting on a bench by the dock with his own fishing rod. "I see you had a good fishing trip," he greeted us. "I'm Bennett Clark, Walter's neighbor," he said, extending his hand. "Parker Hicks, my friend," said, shaking his hand. "And this is Hugh Aldridge. Are you a guest of Walter's?" Bennett asked. He'd mentioned someone was coming. How long have you been fishing on the Sabago? First day, I said. But it's a great place. Best in Maine, Bennett nodded proudly. I've lived here for the last 10 years since I retired. Never regretted it. We got to talking. Bennett turned out to be a former high school history teacher. He'd been widowed 5 years ago and moved to the lake where there was a colony of retired people. There are about 15 of us here, he said, as he helped us carry our catch to the cabin. A kind of community. We fished together, organized barbecues, and in-winter board game nights. Today, by the way, Laura and Jim are having their wedding anniversary party, the 50th. You know, you should come. We don't want to impose, I said. There's no imposition, Bennett said. All of Walter's guests are our guests, especially with a catch like this. He winked, nodding at the fish. Parker accepted the invitation enthusiastically, and I didn't object. After lunch, Bennett returned to walk Usto, Laura, and Jim's house, a large one-story structure on the opposite side of the bay. The party turned out to be warm and homey. Elderly couples and single retirees, about 20 people in all, gathered on a large veranda decorated with garlands and flowers. We were introduced to everyone present, and soon I felt as if I had known these people for years. Jim Emerson, the owner of the house and the master of ceremonies, was a former fishing boat captain. His wife Laura had been a nurse all her life. They married very young and went through many trials together. The secret to a long marriage, Jim interjected when someone asked that question. Respect. Without it, even the strongest love won't survive. I nodded silently, thinking about Edith and how we had always respected each other's choices and space. It was that respect that was sorely lacking in my relationship with my daughter and son-in-law. To my surprise, none of the people gathered treated me condescendingly because of my age. On the contrary, when I mentioned my experience driving a bus, many people were interested in asking about the roots and stories of the driver's life. Years behind the wheel is impressive, said Eleanor, a former librarian who is now a painting enthusiast. You must have seen the country change from the window of your bus. It was the best viewpoint, I agreed, feeling a surge of pride in my work. I've seen small towns turn into suburbs, whole neighborhoods built and torn down. It was like witnessing history in motion. The evening flew by. We sang songs accompanied by Robert playing guitar, shared stories, laughed at jokes. To my surprise, not once did anyone ask me to fix, help, or do anything just to keep me company, to share experiences, to be part of the community. By the time Parker and I walked back to Walter's cabin, it was getting dark. The stars over the lake were shining with a brightness you don't see in the city. You like it here, Parker said. It wasn't a question, but a statement. Very much, I admitted. These people, they're so real, and they treat each other with such respect because they chose to be here, Parker said. Chose these people as their community. No obligations of blood or marriage, just mutual respect and common interests. I pondered his words. Indeed, all these people were here by choice. They had created a kind of family, not by blood, but by spirit. The next days flew by like one. We fished, hiked in the surrounding forests, gathered at someone's house in the evenings to play games or just talk. I got to know some amazing people, each of whom lived a colorful, eventful life. There was Agatha Davis, a former civil rights attorney, who at 70 began writing detective novels. There was Frederick Moon, a former jazz musician who traveled the world. There was Esther and Howard Pierce, a couple who had been teachers in the same school all their lives and raised 5 children. And all of them, absolutely all of them, treated me as an equal, an interesting conversation partner, not as free laborer, a burden. On the 4th day of our stay, as Parker and I were returning from a fishing trip, I noticed my phone's missed call indicator blinking. Several calls to be exact. All from Selma. I decided to call her back tonight. You don't have to, Parker remarked when I told him that. You're entitled to time to yourself. I know, I replied. But I'm still her father. I want to make sure nothing serious has happened. That evening, sitting on the veranda of the lodge with a cup of tea, I dialed my daughter's number. She answered, after the first ring as if she was holding the phone in her hand. "Daddy," her voice sounded strained. "Finally, I've been calling you all day." "I was fishing," I answered calmly. "What's wrong, Selma? What happened?" She was almost screaming. "You disappeared. You didn't tell anyone where you were going. I came to your house and it was empty. I thought something had happened to you. I went to Sabago Lake with a friend," I said. "And I didn't disappear, Selma. I left after we talked. Remember? When you and Randall decided that if I didn't work for you for free, we shouldn't talk." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Selma continued in a quieter voice. "Dad, that's not what we meant. We were upset. We spoke out of turn." "What did you mean?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "Well, that we needed your help. That we were counting on you." I waited for a follow-up, for some kind of admission of wrong, some kind of apology. "And we're in trouble now, Daddy," she said, a whiny note in her voice. "The Ford finally broke down. Randall's late for work because he has to take public transportation. And yesterday in the rain, the porch roof leaked and flooded part of the living room. We need your help, Dad. That's it. Not we miss you. Not we're sorry for what we said, but we need your help." I could feel the frustration building inside. "What about what you said? That if I don't want to help, we shouldn't hang out." "Dad, come on." I could hear the irritation in her voice. It was an emotional moment. We're a family. We need to stick together, especially now that we're in trouble. I remained silent, realizing that she didn't even realize what she was doing wrong. It was normal for her to only turn to me when she needed help and push me away when I asked for simple respect. "So, are you coming back?" Selma asked impatiently. "We really need your help, Dad." I looked out at the lake, at the stars above it, at the warm light in the windows of the neighboring cabins where the people who had become my friends in a matter of days lived. "No, Selma," I said calmly. "I'm not going back now. I'm vacationing with a friend, and we plan to stay here for a few more days." "What?" She obviously didn't expect that answer. "But Daddy, we're in trouble," I explained. "I heard," I said, "but you have the option of calling a professional. A roofer can fix the roof. A mechanic can fix the car. I'm busy right now." "Busy? What could you be busy with?" Her voice sounded as if the very idea that I might have a life of my own seemed absurd to her. "Fishing," I answered simply. "Socializing with friends. Life, Selma. My own life." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard muffled voices, something Selma must have been discussing with Randall. "Daddy," her voice became businesslike. "We're really in a tough spot. Randall says if you'll come back and help with the repairs in the car, we're willing to pay you. It's not much, of course. We're having financial difficulties right now, but still." "That's fair, isn't it?" I almost laughed. They still didn't understand. It wasn't about money. It was about respect, about recognizing my right to my own life to choose. "Tell Randall I don't need his money," I replied. "I'll be back in Saratoga in a few days. And if you want to talk, really talk, not just ask me to do something, I'll be glad to see you. In the meantime, enjoy each other's company and learn to solve problems on your own." I said goodbye softly but firmly and hung up, ignoring her indignant exclamations. It was hard on my heart after all. This was my daughter, and I loved her no matter what. But I knew I was doing the right thing for her, for myself, for our future as a family, if there ever was one. Parker came out on the veranda with 2 glasses of whiskey. "From the look on your face, that was a tough conversation," he said, handing me a glass. "Not easy," I agreed, taking a sip. The warmth of the drink spread through my body, easing the bitterness of the conversation a little. She hadn't called because she was worried about me, but because they needed help with the house and car. Parker shook his head. "And you said no." "Yeah." I stared at the dark surface of the lake with the stars reflecting in it. You know what the funny thing is? Edith saw all this coming. She told me that you have to know how to say no or people will take your kindness for granted. She was a wise woman. Parker nodded. Very. I smiled, remembering my wife. I wish I'd listened to her sooner. Maybe things would have turned out differently then. It's never too late to start listening to wise counsel. Parker repeated a phrase he'd said at the beginning of our journey, even if it was years ago. I nodded, looking up at the stars and thinking that perhaps only now at 75 was I beginning to truly understand what it meant to respect myself and demand respect from others. And that, contrary to everything Selma said, it's not selfishness. It's just healthy boundaries which are necessary in any relationship, even between parents and children. To new beginnings, I raised my glass, repeating our first toast on this lake. To new beginnings, Parker said, and here's to wisdom, which comes when it wants to. We sat on the veranda for a long time, talking about life, about our wives, about trips we'd like to take. At one point, we were joined by Bennett and Agatha, who were returning from an evening walk. The conversation continued filled with laughter and stories. And I thought about how strangely life works. Sometimes you have to lose something familiar to find something much more valuable. Sometimes you have to walk away to realize who you really are. The week at Sebago Lake flew by. Each day was filled with simple pleasures. Fishing at dawn when the fog still lingered over the water. Long walks in the fall forest with leaves rustling underfoot. Evenings with new friends playing board games, or just talking by the fireplace. I felt my shoulders broadening every day, as if I were shedding the invisible weight I had been carrying for the past 3 years. Twice during that time, Selma called, but I didn't pick up. Not out of petty revenge, just didn't want to interrupt the rare moments of peace and joy I'd finally found. She left messages, first annoyed, then begging, but they all boiled down to one thing. They needed my help, and as soon as possible. On the last night of our stay, the local retirement community threw a farewell dinner for Parker and me. The table was set right on the pier, setting up kerosene lamps that created a warm, cozy light. Jim Emerson prepared his specialty, salmon baked with herb spick from the local woods. Agatha brought homemade bread, and Bennett brought bottles of his own apple cider. To new friends, Jim proclaimed, raising his glass, which I hope will soon become old friends. Everyone laughed and raised their glasses. I looked at those faces, glowing with sincere kindness and joy, and thought about how quickly they had accepted me into their circle. No conditions, no expectations, just because they enjoyed my company and I enjoyed theirs. You should come back in the spring, Eleanor said as she put more salad on my plate. It's paradise when the apple trees are in bloom. I will, I promised, and it was a sincere promise. After dinner, when most of the guests had gone, Parker, Bennett, Agatha, and I sat around a small fire on the beach. The conversation turned to family, children, and grandchildren. The joys and challenges of intergenerational relationships. My son Nathan has only recently realized that I am not just his mother, but a separate person with my own interests and desires, Agatha said, looking thoughtfully at the fire. It took him 42 years and my flat refusal to babysit his children every weekend to realize that. And how did he take the refusal? I asked, thinking about my situation. Oh, it was a whole drama, she grinned. Accusations of selfishness, reminders of how much he'd done for me, the standard stuff. But I stood my ground. I love my grandchildren, but I want to see them when I want to see them, not on a schedule that suits my son and daughter-in-law. And you know what? After a couple months, things got better. Now they ask if it's convenient for me beforehand instead of just putting it in front of me. I nodded, recognizing in her story echoes of my own. "What about you, Hugh?" Bennett asked. "You don't seem to be doing well with your daughter either, do you?" I talked briefly about the situation with Selma and Randall, how I had gradually become their free laborer and my sudden decision to leave them. I recognized Thestery. Bennett nodded. "My daughter never asked me to do anything around the house, but she expected me to babysit my grandchildren every time they wanted to go out. When I refused, once again canceling my plans for the evening, she was genuinely indignant. "But what could you possibly be doing?" she asked, as if a man in his 70s couldn't have a life of his own. "That's exactly the kind of question Selma asked me." I shook my head. It was as if the very idea that I might have my own affairs seemed absurd to her. "It's a common problem," Parker said. "Children, even adults, often see us only in the role of father, mother, grandfather, grandmother. It's hard for them to realize that we are human beings first and foremost, with our own desires, interests, and the right to our own time." "The right to our own time," I repeated thoughtfully. It sounds so simple, but somehow it is so hard to defend because we often forget that right, Agatha said, especially when it comes to children. We get used to putting their needs before our own, and that pattern persists even when they grow up. We talked for a long time about children, about boundaries, about the importance of self-respect. As I listened to the stories of these people, so different but united by common experiences, I felt a resolve grow inside. I am not alone in my situation, and if they were able to find balance, then so can I. Saturday morning greeted us with pouring rain. Parker and I quickly packed our bags, said goodbye to the lodge owner, and headed back. The drive took longer because of the worsening weather, and by evening, as we entered Saratoga, I was feeling tired, but it was the pleasant fatigue of a man who had had a good time. Parker offered to let me stay at his place another night, but I decided to go home. It was time to face my life head-on. The house greeted me with a chill and a slight musty odor, typical of a room that had been closed for a week. I opened the windows despite the drizzle, put on the kettle, and began to sort through the mail that Mrs. Peterson had carefully stacked on the table. Bills, advertisements, a couple of magazines I subscribed to. Nothing much. Just as I was settling into my chair with a cup of tea, the doorbell rang, sharp, insistent. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Selma stood on the doorstep, drenched from the rain, with disheveled hair and red eyes. She looked as if she hadn't slept for several nights. "Daddy," she exclaimed and hugged me with a rush. "You're back at last." I gently pulled away and let her into the house. "You're soaked. Let me make you some tea." She walked into the living room looking around nervously, as if checking to see if anything had changed in the week I'd been away. "I called you several times," she began with reproach in her voice. "You didn't answer." "I was busy," I replied simply, pouring her tea. "I was on vacation with friends." "With friends?" She looked surprised. "What friends? New and old?" I didn't go into details. "What's the matter, Selma? You look upset." She took a sip of tea and set the cup down so sharply that some of the contents spilled out onto the saucer. "What's wrong? You're asking what happened?" Her voice trembled. "You disappeared for a week. You didn't answer your phone, and we're falling apart." "What's falling apart?" I asked calmly. "Everything!" She splashed her hands. "The Ford has finally broken down. The mechanic says we have to replace the whole engine. The roof on the porch is leaking more and more, and yesterday's rainstorm flooded half the living room. Randall is late for work because of public transportation, and his boss has already reprimanded him, and now their refrigerator is acting up." I listened to this stream of complaints, noting that not once did I hear, "We missed you," or "We were worried," just problems that I had to fix. "And what do you want me to do, Selma?" I asked when she paused to catch her breath. "Help us, Daddy." There was desperation in her voice. "You've always helped us. Look at the car. Fix the roof. At least temporarily. Randall says he's willing to pay you. She said it like she was doing me a big favor. It's a little bit of a hardship right now, but still. I looked at my daughter, a 40-year-old woman who was acting like a cranky child expecting daddy to solve all her problems. And I suddenly realized with startling clarity that I was partly to blame for this myself. I'd indulged her for too long. For letting her use me without asking for anything in return, not even basic respect. No, I said calmly. What? She stared at me blankly. I said, no, Selma. I won't fix your car or your roof or your refrigerator. But why? She looked genuinely shocked. You've always helped. You're my father. That's exactly why I took a sip of tea, gathering my thoughts. I'm your father, Selma. Not your handyman, not your free mechanic, not Randall's handyman. I'm a man who loves you and wants to be a part of your life. But on terms of mutual respect, not one-sided exploitation. Exploitation? She looked insulted. How can you say that? We're a family. Yes, we are, I agreed. And that's why it pains me to realize that for the past 3 years, we've only seen each other when you need something from me. You don't call just to ask how I'm doing. You don't just invite me over for dinner with no ulterior motive. Every meeting we have comes with a list of things I have to do for you. That's not true, she exclaimed, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Isn't it? I sighed. Selma, when was the last time you asked about my life? About my interests, my plans, my friends? You were surprised that I had friends, as if you couldn't imagine that I have a life beyond helping you. She opened her mouth to object, but immediately closed it. Her face reflected an internal struggle between her usual pattern of behavior and the realization of the truth in my words. What do you want from me, Daddy? She finally asked quietly. I want to be your father, not your servant, I answered. I want you to call me because you miss me, not because the refrigerator broke. I want our relationship to be built on love and respect, not on what I can do for you, but we're really in a tough spot right now. She looked at me almost pleadingly. We need help, I understand, I nodded. And I'm willing to help Selma, but not the way I have been. Not indefinitely, not gratuitously, and most of all, not as a matter of course. If you're asking me as a father to help you in a difficult situation, I'll do what I can. But if you and Randall just want to save money on repairs at my expense, no. Selma wassilent for a long time, staring into her cup. I watched her face shift. Between emotions, distrust, resentment, anger, and finally something resembling understanding. You've changed, Daddy, she finally said. Yes, I agreed. I've changed. I've begun to respect myself, Selma, and demand respect from others, even from my own daughter. And now what? She looked confused. Aren't you going to help us? I will, Ismailed, but on my terms. If you need my help with the car, I'll see what I can do. But don't expect me to show up at the first call dropping what I'm doing. Don't expect me to work from dawn to dusk as your personal handyman, and most importantly, don't take my help for granted. That's fair, she said slowly, as if tasting the word. And one more thing, I added. I want us to see each other sometimes, just like that. No to-do list, no ulterior motives, just a father and daughter spending time together. Tears came to her eyes. I'll try, Daddy, she said in a shaky voice. I really will. I went over and hugged her, feeling her cling to me like when she was a little girl and something scared her. In that moment, she was my little girl again, not a grown woman who only saw me as a tool to solve her problems. I love you, Selma, I said quietly, and I always will. But love doesn't have to mean sacrificing yourself to the point of exhaustion. Edith has always understood that. It's time we understood it too. The mention of Edith made her WCC. She pulled away and looked at me with moist eyes. Mom would never have let us treat you like that, she admitted with a sigh. She always protected you, even from me. She protected all of us, I corrected, from our worst selves. Now we'll have to learn to do it ourselves. Selma wiped her eyes and smiled weakly. I don't know what Randall will say. That's your business. I shrugged. But if he wants me to help you, he'll have to accept my terms. Otherwise, there are plenty of specialists who will do anything for money. She nodded, clearly not fully convinced, but at least willing to try. It was a small step, but in the right direction. After Selma left, I sat in my chair for a long time looking at Edith's picture. The conversation had been difficult, but necessary. I didn't know if Selma and Randall would really be able to change their attitude toward me, but at least now they knew my position, and I wasn't going to back down from it. The next morning, I called Parker and suggested a walk to the lake in the park. It was a sunny day despite the chill of fall. We sat on a bench by the water, fed the ducks, and talked about the past week, new friends from Sebago Lake, and plans for the future. Selma came by yesterday, I said, when the topic of conversation turned to my family. How did it go? Parker looked interested, but not surprised. Better than I expected, I admitted. She was in a panic over their house and car problems, demanding my immediate help. But I refused. Not exactly refused. I said I would help, but on my terms with respect for my time and effort. And she agreed. I guess she had no choice. I grinned. It was the first time she'd seen that I wasn't going to give up and go back to the way things were. Good. Parker nodded approvingly. You know, Hugh, I'm proud of you. Not everyone at our age can find the strength to change an established relationship, especially with children. Thank you. I smiled, feeling warmed by his words. You know, I used to think it was too late to change things, that at 75, you should just go with the flow and accept things as they are. But this week, it showed me that it's never too late to start respecting yourself and demanding respect from others. Exactly. Parker nodded. Age is just a number. It's how you feel inside that matters. We sat on the bench, looking out at the lake, at the ducks scurrying about, at the fall leaves swirling in the breeze. I thought about how my life had changed in 1 week, about new friends, about a new sense of freedom and self-worth, about the fact that for the first time in a long time, I was looking to the future with hope instead of tired resignation. Do you know what Edith would say if she were here? I asked, looking up at Thesky where the clouds were floating leisurely. What? Parker turned to me. She'd say, I told you, Hugh. I always said you're stronger than you think. He smiled, remembering her voice, her intonation. And she was right. She always was. Smart women are usually right. Parker smiled, too. Virginia had said a lot of things to me, too, that I only listened to after she left. We fell silent, each of us immersed in our own memories. I suddenly thought that perhaps our wives were looking down at us now, nodding approvingly, seeing that we were finally living the life they had always wanted with dignity and self-respect. By the way, Bennett called this morning, Parker said, breaking the silence. He and Agatha are going on a little trip up the coast next month. They're inviting us to join them. Sounds like fun, I thought. You know, I think I'm going to go for it. I've been wanting to see the ocean again for a long time. That's great. Parker clapped me on the shoulder. Then it settled. I nodded, feeling the anticipation growing inside me. For the first time in a long time, I looked forward to the future, not with anxiety or apathy, but with interest. At 75, my life was not ending. It was as if it were beginning anew on new, healthier grounds. The ducks on the shore made a fuss, sharing a piece of bread someone had thrown. Parker and he laughed as we watched the commotion. The day was beautiful. The air was fresh, and there were many new roads and opportunities ahead. I thought of Selma, of our conversation yesterday. Maybe Shirley will be able to change. Maybe we could build a new, healthier relationship based on mutual respect rather than one-sided exploitation. Or maybe we won't. But either way, I was no longer going to sacrifice my dignity for the illusion of a family relationship. To new beginnings, I said, raising an imaginary glass. To new beginnings, Parker said. And here's to never being too late to start respecting yourself. I smiled, looking out at the lake and thinking that Edith would be pleased. She'd always wanted me to be strong, to not let anyone, not even our daughter, rob me of my dignity. And even though it took 75 years and a week on a lake in Maine to do it, better late than never. Sometimes you have to walk away to find yourself. Sometimes you have to lose something familiar to find something much more valuable. And sometimes what seems like the end is actually the beginning of something new and wonderful.